University and is also a consultant to rural community organizations. So our lone lady is Miss Cherie Starr, or Pumpkin as she is shown. She is a popular educator, social justice trainer, and a musician from North Alabama. With the Highlander Center, she has directed two cohorts of intergenerational, fellowship for projects addressing current economic and racial inequity in Central Appalachia. She has also trained and facilitated workshops about land justice, economic justice, community organizing tactics, strategy making, and Black land laws. Her current work is focused on Black land and place-based projects in the South. And last but not least, we have Majadi Baruti. I'm so sorry if I murdered that. Please correct me later. Having experienced the precarity of hunger as a young boy, but also being raised as a mother from a mother who encouraged and shared the importance of family and community as far as a basic ethic. He grew up in Chicago and was raised to believe that the power of cooperative work and mutual aid, and particularly moving on with communities towards food sovereignty. And so those are our panelists today. And you can learn more about them by following ASAN on Facebook or on Instagram. That's where I got these wonderful bios. And so today we're going to be talking about three things and why Black land matters. We're going to be talking about Black land loss, Black land retention, and then Black land access. So in the groups, hopefully you were able to share how you are connected to the land, whether it's from a personal experience or whether it is from just your job, your career. So we really want to make sure that everyone is engaged, not just the panelists, but also anyone who is just here participating with us. And so if you have any things that you'd like to share, please put it in the chat. We would love for you to be engaged, whether it's affirmations, questions that we can hopefully get to at the end or somewhere in between. But the first question I would like to open up to everyone, the panelists included, and then those who can put it in the chat. And this is going to the importance of land. So when you think about land, what are the feelings or what are the thoughts that come to mind? So when I think of land, I think of peacefulness. I think of a memory harvesting crops with my grandfather and my grandmother. I think of the garden that I have in the back that my dad made for me. So I have a lot of wonderful memories when I think of land. So again, if you have anything that you'd like to share, please put it in the chat. What does land mean to you? What do you feel? What's the fuzzy feelings? Or it might be, loss. It might be sad feelings, but please, we're really anxious for everyone to share. And I'm also just going to share it to everyone. And so of our panel. So Pumpkin, being the lady, will you please go first? And please just give us a little intro of what kind of feelings foster when you think about land?
Land is everything to me. Land is liberation. Land is grief. Land is love. Land is honesty. I think that it's a complicated relationship that I have. I think even through this year with COVID, I've been reaching for nature because of amongst all the lies, amongst all the info that we don't get about this past year, or the lies that we have to depend on certain systems that are not for us. I look to nature and it's honest. And I've told myself I was going to reach for that, encourage people to reach for that, to move like nature, to be like nature, to take care of things like nature, and to also feel loved from it because it keeps showing up for us every day. So yeah, that's what land is for me.
Wonderful. Oh man, you hit everything on that. Mr. Pinnick, Dr. Z, would anybody else like to jump on? That might be a little hard to do after that.
No, I would. This is Jared Pennick. I would say land is, and then just leave it blank. You fill in what it means to you. I don't think there's an agreed upon African American land ethic, so it means different things to different people. To me, it means power. Power to feed yourself, power to have some degree of economic independence, political independence. Uh, Land can be an asset, it can be a liability. Uh, Land being a liability is why we've lost so much of it. We've let it become, it has become a liability to so many of us because of external forces. So again, I think land is power. I have a long connection with the land. Uh, Growing up, my summer jobs was picking cotton on white farms. Um, so that was a negative to me. But I also learned that my grandfather's farm was stolen. I learned that at a later date. It was stolen by a white man down in South Alabama. But again, I think land is power. There is no agreed upon African American land ethic. I think we need one because there are so many. We see it in so many different ways, and I think that's one of the reasons we can't come together as a cohesive unit to really save Black-owned land.
Yeah, I think that for me, land means family, and both sides of my family came from small farms. Well, my great grandfather on my father's side came over from Poland, and they had a farm in Western Virginia, and they were there for years and years, and then all of a sudden it's gone. No one knows what happened to it, but it's not ours anymore. And then my grandparents on my mother's side, I just found out had land near Ponce, Puerto Rico. And I said, I didn't know we had land. And they said, well, we don't. What happened? It's gone. And so the family grew up with land, and land was important. It was also something that, no one can explain. It's gone. And so it's one of those things that it means family, but it also means loss. Questions.
For
When
sure.
I think about land, when I first started farming back my junior year in high school, it was a very negative narrative around me doing it. My classmates will always talk about like how, you're out there doing like slave work and stuff like that. But when I started farming, I realized how it became like a part of me. It was like a passion of mine, and I enjoyed it. And as I grew throughout the organization I worked for, I realized how impactful it became to the kids that we brought out to like our farms and stuff like that, like how much they like love and like enjoy it. So it kind of switched from being like a negative, oh, why are you doing slave work things, to being like, oh, we're impacting people. We're able to provide crops to like our local communities and teachers and parents. So that's what I think about land now. It's positive. It's a good thing. It's home. It's my passion. So yeah, thank you.
Wonderful. No, thank you. And we have a couple of comments in the chat. We have that land is life, peace, ancestors. A land is building wealth, freedom, peace of mind when used properly. And then Majadi, if you just want to speak on yours, of course you can do so. But he also has brought some wonderful memories of his family, and that's in the chat.
Hey, so my spirituality, so I'm clergy. I'm a devotee of the goddess in her African forms. My spirituality is founded in the ancestral connections I have to Alabama. Literally, the blood of Black women runs through this state. And that comes in a number of different dynamics. The beauty of flowers, hummingbirds, trees, bees. And then I remember growing up in Chicago, and my Aunt Pat, who was a strange woman. I always say that she was old when I was a little boy, and she was old when I was grown. I mean, she just stayed the same age or something, as Black women tend to seem to do. My Aunt Pat, she grew tomatoes in this tiny patch of soil near an alley in Chicago, out this apartment building that she owned. So that concept of Black women owning land and owning buildings and things was like really powerful for me. That was like a normal construct, but she shared those peppers and those tomatoes. I learned that type of thing And then I studied the understanding of cooperatives, and cooperating was an early dynamic that I connected to land. And so I get here to Alabama, and somebody says, "Well, what brought you to Alabama?" I said, "Well, a beautiful Black woman. What the hell else would bring you to Alabama? Nothing, oh, let me go to Alabama." That doesn't happen. So that's what happened to me. And since living here, my sister friends have taught me that the land would protect me if I would just be with it. But when I moved to Birmingham, Alabama, I did not like this place. I don't really do urbanity really well, even though I grew up in Chicago. But the land has done that. It has protected me. It has fed me. And so there's a whole spiritual connection that I have to the hummingbirds and the bees that fly around the urban farm we have here, and the work we do with Dynamite Hill Smithfield Community Land Trust.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So we're going to get really into the meat of our topic, which is Black Land Matters. And we spoke a little bit on this just from our panelists talking about how land can be empowering, but it also can bring in some negative things and bring in loss. And so our first topic is going to be Black land loss. So this is the question I'm going to pose to the panel. In 1973, Robert Brown published a report entitled "Only 6 Million Acres and the Decline of Black-Owned Land in the Rural South." And so, as we know, at the turn of the century of 1901, 1910, there was 16 million million acres of Black-owned land, and now there's been a very steep decline. We get numbers of about 2 million acres now. So the first question I would like to pose is, what are the factors for this rapid land loss during the first century, the first part of the 20th century? So again, what are the factors that led to that land loss? And how we're going to shape this out just for everyone in participating, it's going to be like a round table. Everyone's just going to, as far as the panelists, it's not going to just be on one person spotlighted. We're just going to be bouncing off of the 4 panelists, and hopefully I'll be able to keep everyone in time wise. So I'm going to pose this one just to Mr. Pinnock, and then hopefully we'll just be able to bounce off.
First, let me say that I was really brought into this whole area and struggle by Dr. Robert S. Brown at the Black Economic Research Center conducted that study. He formed an organization, the Emergency Land Fund, and I came to work with that organization, and later on, after 10 years, merged with the Federation of Southern Cooperatives and became the Federation of Southern Cooperatives Land Assistance Fund. As far as the land laws itself, there are 3 or 4 areas. That study talked about some of it. The Great Migration, I call it forced migration from the south to the north. Heirs property, I'll be able to talk about that later on. But a lot of things that people don't talk about is voluntary sales of land. It happened then, it's happening now. That African Americans are voluntarily selling their land, not just necessarily because they want to, because, as I said earlier, it has become a liability to them, tax liability, air property, and other type issues that is forcing them to sell the land. And when a Black person sells this land, it's estimated that 99.9% of the time, it's always sold to a white person. It's never sold to another Black person. So that's one of the big reasons why. As a matter of fact, voluntary sales, heirs property is second to voluntary sales in African American land laws. We get a lot of attention on heirs property, and rightly so, but we need to look at why we're being forced to sell our land too. What resources do we need to target in order to so we won't have to sell our land? Again, and another one reason why we lost the land is we didn't have access to resources in our markets, farmland. The USDA has a history of discrimination. It didn't just start with its last 20 years, it's been since its inception. It's discriminating against black farmers and landowners. So they never had access to resources. That's the other thing. Another area is tax sales, not having resources to pay your taxes. Another area is lack of access to competent legal help when you run into legal problems. All of these combine to force African Americans from their land. And another thing is that there's lack of, for lack of a better term, education on our part, especially to generations past, generations coming along, about the importance of owning the land. There's just a flight from rural areas to the urban centers. We don't have the next generation come along who want to farm the land or buy the land. I know people keep saying that the African Americans are returning to the land, but they really aren't. Not in any big way. They really aren't. When you say the African Americans will return to South, they're returning to Atlanta. They're returning to Birmingham, North Carolina, Charlotte, somewhere. They're not returning to the land. A lot of them are doing a lot of urban farming, but the urban farmers got to realize you'll never grow enough to feed our people. There has to be a connection between urban and rural farmers, because the urban farmer would never grow enough to give us any appreciable amount of food security or food sovereignty. So you have to partner with the rural farmers, and those are the areas that really are causing us to lose the land.
I think Jerry just said it all. But I want to make a connection to, the Great Migration and land loss, but the connection, like he was saying, the connection of the current generation with past generations. Mm-hmm. Now, you may have a return to land, even if they come to the rural areas, these are older retirees.
Right.
They're not the ones that are going to carry forward. And what we really need to focus on is the young generation. That is the importance of land, how to make it attractive. We had an exceptional speaker at the PAWC, and she has a farm up in New York State, where she's turning it into a learning farm, where she has interns, where people come and learn and go out. But we have to look at this idea that, people, this idea of farming is, instilled in people's, you're behind a mule and you're plowing and just dying, as opposed to this is a 21st century activity that brings power and wealth and spiritual commitment to the land. And when we do that with the young people, we have students graduating from Tuskegee, starting with just, an acre and expanding out. So we have to make that connection that, that it's not a permanent loss, that you can come back and, rejuvenate.
I agree with the connection being a part of it. I'm still kind of sitting on our intro question, Dr. Pinnock, saying that we need to find a Black land ethic. Like, I don't know if that hit y'all the same way, but it kind of was like, we actually really do in an urgent way. And I think it's really thinking about how that Black land ethic can be how can we define it that land is about spirituality and sustenance? How can we define Black land ethic about, even with the factors of the voluntary land, the sale of land, like looking at what's right now, what are people experiencing now across ages, intergenerationally, across ages? Because, in my family, in my personal life, I have older people in my family discouraging me to go back to the land because they know that I am living in a situation that things cost way more now. Like things just cost more. So my generation, the generation younger than me, we're dealing with the economic justice issue that means that we have to migrate to urban areas for jobs. It's hard for us to stay here. Where I'm living now in Central Appalachia, it's hard to stay in rural areas because of economic issues. So how can we start forming a Black land ethic that looks at where we are now, looks at how we can actually start addressing that now and how we can leverage power for people to stay, in land. I think the spiritual connection to land is the thing that we already have. We know where our food comes from. We know where nature is, but what are the barriers that keeps us from that? And I think when I first kind of sat on this question too, I immediately first thought, oh, we started losing land in the beginning of, that century, but look at before that. Look at like 1865 on the Atlantic coast when they gave us the 40 acres and a mule, but then a year later took it back. Like this, our government never wanted Black folks to have land. It was never set up for us to have it. So we might have had a lot then, and then it started trickling off, but we had factors like banks. We had factors like the government never wanting it and continuously throwing legislation on us to keep us from it. And then we had an economic justice, just being kept from economic justice. So it was never meant for us to even have it. So we might have had a lot in the beginning of the 20th century, but it was never meant for us to even have that. And it was a lot of factors definitely going against us for us to lose that, including white violence and terrorism of white farmers literally killing people for Black people's land. So I think it's a grace of God that Black people have had land in, because it was definitely not set up for us to.
Yeah, I want to tie into what has been said thus far, yet twist it a little bit to the left. Land loss, I'm going to push that perhaps we remove that from our vocabulary, because it is similar to saying that it's like you lost your keys or you lost your brand new pen that you bought that was $57.37. That's not what happened. We didn't lose it. Oops, my land. That's not what happened. We have to deal with terrorism. And I'm following the course of Sister Dara Cooper and Dr. Monica White and others to work with the National Black Food and Justice Alliance, turning away from that terminology because you cannot lose it. The land was taken through economic, physical violence, and of course the terrorism was mentioned there. The Great Migration, again, and I like the way Brother Jerry put it in the construct of a forced migration from the South to the North. That's what happened to my people in Alabama here. So I'm trying to re-engage that that land that I'm actually, in about a couple of weeks, I'm actually physically go to where it was and see what's there, because it's kind of hard to tell from Google Maps what's there, and try to do some work in reclamation. And I know heirs property, I understand that I am willing to go through this construct. And I know it will be hell and high water, but I've died before, so I'm fine. It's not gonna be a problem for me. The voluntary sales, absolutely. The lack of access to the same resources as big ag folk. However, and then lastly, I want to tie into the urban ag and connection to rural ag. So we're doing some work around that in Birmingham to make those connections. And you're absolutely right, Jerry. That is that's a powerful construct. However, if you look at Birmingham, Alabama, we certainly don't have hundreds of acres that are connected, but we got quite a lot of empty plots here that can feed small neighborhoods. So it's kind of like that thing. It's kind of a piecemeal type of thing that we're trying to work on. But definitely, we have already had some constructs with building up a cooperative food construct with some rural farmers in some of the local, Chilton County and some of the counties around Jefferson County here. So we are making some connection there. And that is a crucial thing that we discovered that we're going to have. You're absolutely right. So we built up a farmer's market that is completely separate from the state of Alabama. We don't have we do our own thing. And that's what we're using. So we have rural farmers and we have urban farmers as well in that idea. The thing I found about Africans is that we are, I don't like to use the word resilient, but we are damned resourceful. You know how Batman has that belt? He seems to have some of everything on that belt. That's what I've seen from us. And that is what we can place our, we can put a hat on that. And that's the stuff that we can utilize to get what we need to feed ourselves.
Yeah, for sure. I think that was such a wonderful history lesson. that I think sometimes gets overlooked because it's sometimes you just think of the now problem and you have to say, okay, well, how did we get to here? So thank you for that history lesson from everyone. And I also want to say the importance of land. Of course, we think about it, sometimes it's just feeling, but when you think about at the beginning of the century what land meant, as far as self-sufficiency, generational wealth, calling it your own, I like to equate the importance of land to the importance of the vote. And then you have to also think about, why are they trying so hard to take the vote away? Why are they trying so hard to make sure that Black people don't have any land? And to me, that alone gets me powered up. But it definitely tells you, okay, this is important, because if it wasn't important, there wouldn't be, this much about it. And I would like to thank Majadi, because he kind of put us in our next topic, which is heirs property. And heirs property is one of those things that if you want to, you could talk about it for the rest of eternity. So being mindful of time, the next question is about heir property and how that has contributed to Black land loss. And so can any of our panels speak on the significance of heir property and how it's been such a struggle to keep, or why is it so vulnerable? Why is heir property so vulnerable? So I guess giving a quick definition of it and then talking about how it has contributed so much to Black land loss. Dr. Z, if you want to chime in.
Yeah, we're talking about heir property or heirs property, land that's passed down across generations without a probated will, so to speak. So that, and like you said, we could spend all day just looking at, what happens to it and how it gets lost in tax sales and partition sales. And, we've talked to a lot of people about why you don't have a will. I mean, it comes down to some of that is, why don't you have a will? And, I could say there's a lot of different reasons, but two major reasons. One is, again, a land ethic. That is, land was meant for the family. And if you deed land to different people, that means that you're saying this person owns it and this other member of the family doesn't own it. And so a lot of folks keep their land open because they say, anytime you need to come back home, if you lose your house, you can put a trailer on this land. You don't have to ask anyone's permission. This is family land. At the same time, of course, we know that land is at risk, because when you have, and we've talked about this before, to have 10 or 20 heirs is not unusual. To have 50 to 100 heirs, again, not unusual. You could have 1,000 heirs. But all it takes is one of those heirs that owns 1% of 1% living in LA, that someone comes and says, I want to buy out your share, and then they can force a sale and you can lose the land. So I think, this idea, one is that people, that's family, and you don't divide family. And the other main idea that we've come across too is, that deals with families, they want to cause family problems. If I give my child this piece of land, does the other child feel like they're being left out? And they say, I'm going to let them decide after I'm gone. So I'll stop there because we can keep going. But those two things have been, when we've talked to farmers and landowners about, you don't have a will, why don't you have a will? Those two come up a lot.
And let me chime in on that, Robert. Before I do that, Pumpkin. I'm working with a couple of students at the university, and we are developing a paper on developing an African-American land ethic. So we may be reaching out to some of you all to chime in every now and then. But on the air property on the air property piece, Robert, it worked. It worked. It was a way to hold on to the land until the power structure saw it as a way to take the land. And our people just weren't didn't know enough about it to know the dangers of air property. even my family had a problem with it. I mean, I was working on this issue all my life, and one of the hardest jobs I had was convincing my parents to make a will so they could save their land. Because they always, until they died, they thought that if they didn't make a will, the land would stay in the family.
Mm-hmm.
And it was hard to educate our people about that, and give them alternatives to our property, which is good, and which is what we've been able to do. And there have been some decrease, I think, in the amount of land being lost by our property simply because of the educational and outreach of community-based organizations in the 1890s and others.
Yeah, so just for a recap for everyone who's watching, we have the definition of heir property is a parcel of land that has not been probated through a will, and therefore the heirs of that landowner are co-tenants of that land. And so everyone has a percentage of that land. It doesn't mean that you have an acreage, it just means that you have a percentage. So if someone has 100 acres, they have 4 children, they don't have a spouse, they died, that means each child has 25% of that parcel, not 25 acres, but 25%. And it creates vulnerability in the land that can either be lost through tax sales, it can be lost through partition sales. And like our speaker said, it gave some type of security at the very beginning, but then when it was able to be taken by many ways, courthouse games, selling the land, 3 days before, and having to pay for it in cash with social disadvantaged groups as it is, land was lost and continues to be lost in that way. So I think my PSA is write a will.
Right.
And it's just write a will or talk to your people to make sure that they are writing wills. We know that that's a hard thing to talk about, but it's very important when you think about the importance of Black land and keeping it in your family, because as Dr. Zabawa always says, especially in Alabama, if you don't probate your will, if you don't say what you want to do with your land, then the state will. And so the state of Alabama would choose what happens to your land if you don't choose what happens to your land.
And if you're Black, the choice won't be good.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the education piece personally. With my family, it was just a lot of like not knowing how to make a will. And then even on like even at like the act of the Uniform Partition of Heirs act that was passed in Alabama, it was 2014.
Yep.
Yeah. 2014-ish.
Yeah,
it passed. And it's I mean, I always tell people, I did research on this act with Fordham students, with Black Land and Power, about this act. And it was mainly like, what is it? It's kind of like that moment of education, like just what is it? And I know what we found was that this act was created. What's important about it's created to address Black heirship issues. It's on the act, it's on the person who wrote it. They said this is what it was for. But then also we found when we were researching it that a lot of lawyers don't know about it. Mm-hmm. So even in the states that it passed in about 13 states, which Alabama is one of them, is like a lot of lawyers don't know about it. A lot of people just don't know about it. And I don't particularly think it's like a salvation act, like it's if you have to meet this legislation, that means you're in trouble. That means there's already been partition sale starting to happen and you were in the court and you're already dealing with it. So you're already in trouble. But knowing it and having lawyers that are knowledgeable of it, it can be used as a way to protect you, because it created more procedures and steps to avoid you losing your land if you were one of the tenants. So I definitely think it's an education training part, which I think is really important for forums like this, for ASAN, for all the like land groups to be sharing that knowledge to people just on the ground in communities, to write a will, but also like know some legislation too, and be connected to lawyers.
But like Jerry said before, it's really important is even to get access into the system requires resources. You know, they're not lawyers out there saying, "Hey, come to me. I'm going to do this for free." You know, you might find organizations like the Federation has a a center that deals with air property. They have some lawyers, but they can't do all the legal issue, the stuff that goes to all the people that need to have assistance. And I guess that's one of the things that the new that law that's proposed by Cory Booker, the Justice for Black Farmers Act, talks about some of these resources that need to be put out there in the field. And so yeah, education is important. The Unified Partition of Air Property Act is important. The Farm Bill has $5 million or $10 million set aside to help resolve this, but they haven't posted the rules after 2 years so that people can get access to it. So a lot of it does boil down to, again, who has the resources to avail themselves of these programs.
Yeah, and like you said, the education is never over with. And I think that's one of the main things that ASAN is doing a wonderful job with, is just making sure that we are continually educating the masses and trying to break down those laws and those acts that, like Pumpkin said, are very daunting when you look at it. But then when you say, okay, how is this helpful to me? I think that organizations, like you said, like the Federation, like 1890s,